On this episode of the show, I have with me Sara Wyman. She is founder and CEO at Stackpack, and we're going to talk a little bit about her journey into becoming a founder. She has a fantastic background, worked in the investment banking space. She has a Wharton MBA. We're going to talk about the opportunities she saw for the company, and leaving a corporate job behind is big, but she made the decision, and partnering with people that's an important part for her, and we'll ask her about that and some of the learnings along the way and see what else we can get in there with this session. But Sara, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I guess it'd be great to know what the company does before we dive in.
I'm the founder and CEO of Stackpack. We are an AI assistant for finance and operations teams. So we help manage all their spend, all their contracts, really anything for the vendors that run their company. So that can be software, AI, services, consultants, all that good stuff. And so when they work with us, we pretty much immediately, literally within minutes, give them full visibility into every dollar, every vendor. We store and monitor all their contracts. We identify cost savings, we track budgets and renewals. And ultimately, as any good AI tool does, we help save time, just because there's a ton of data basically at their fingertips. And so we're really rethinking how finance teams can get analysis and reporting on basically the cost side of their business.
Fantastic. That's a very narrow use case, but obviously lots of occurrences in. We'll dive into a little bit about that as well. I guess if we're gonna kick off the episode, we'll dial back a little bit in terms of earlier stage in your career. Obviously, you worked within various functions at different companies, and deep background in investment banking. Got an MBA from Wharton, so I guess most people would see that and go, "Hey, traditionally, you've got a pretty good path set, and just go ahead." But I guess maybe for a little while you did.
Yeah. So I started out, I did the Wall Street thing coming out of undergrad, fought my way in for a seat there. And I was actually at Bear Stearns, in the months before the collapse, which was a wild time to be there. Went over to UBS, did sales and trading there, did spend some time at Bank of America doing investment banking. Wild time. It's actually kind of reminds me of where we are today, watching, just layoffs. It was a wild time. And you do make it through it all, certainly, and the market does turn around. But yeah, it started out there. I think that the big learning for me, I loved the buyer seller dynamics of the markets. And that played a big role into what I went to next after all of that. And certainly what we're doing here at Stackpack. So loved working on the front lines in banking, loved the energy, loved the hard work. Ultimately, though, there was a moment where I realized I had to change course. And I was working on the Lululemon IPO, which was a really cool thing to work on at the time. I thought it was very cool. And at the time got to, engage with the leadership team, and really quickly realized, in that work, that I was like, I want to be that CEO. I don't want to be that managing director, And so that was kind of the turning moment for me when I decided to go to Wharton and take a different path.
Interesting. I guess, as you left investment banking and you got into, some of the roles that you mentioned, you obviously saw different dynamics, saw different opportunities, seeing a different side of the market as well. You wanted to be, why not be one of those people versus helping them go public, be one of those people. I guess the idea for the company, and you kind of just touched on it early on, but the idea for the company was it a single thing that was like that spark inspiration? Was it a continuous pattern you saw? What was it for you that you were like, I think I have something here?
I have to do this. Yeah. It was continued pattern, which I think, you want to have lived the problem that you're going to solve work on for the next 10 years. And so I was at Etsy, right before the IPO. And then I was at Affirm, the buy now, pay later company, for 7 years, all the way through IPO. And, obviously bought tons of software and services, and ran a bunch of teams at those companies. I always was fascinated by just what a mess it was. Like we were just consuming, millions and millions and millions of dollars of stuff and nobody was tracking it. And you track what you care about, right? You track about you track your customers, you track your people in HRIS systems, but people weren't really tracking vendors in that way. And so I went on a journey to understand that better. Before I founded the company, I think I spoke to 75 CFOs and operations leaders and, found the same thing. They all felt like it was chaotic. They weren't really managing these appropriately. It was a lot of data all over the place, right? Like you have some spend in credit cards, you have some spend in invoices, your contracts are floating around in everybody's inboxes, right? And then there's different risk levels with every single vendor. Every contract looks completely different. And so maybe this is a good thing, but, once I got to interview 20 and then 30 and then 40, the feedback all just kind of got pretty predictable. And then it became really clear that there was something to build there.
I like that. So I love it when a founder, to-be founder, goes out and actually wants to understand if their idea has traction or merit before they start building and creating. I mean, obviously, there's different ways of going about it. There's also not a wrong way of going to build first and then finding product market fit. So I think there's multiple ways. There's just in this discussion is a little bit different. I guess when you were starting to go through that process, I mean, if we did take a step back, you've had some great jobs like, Wharton MBA, I think I mentioned it, probably not lacking for opportunity. Sure, there's going to be another job out there. To leave some of that behind, not everyone will. I mean, you did, but to leave that behind, to leave the corporate brand, to leave those benefits, to leave all those things and go, hey, I'm going to go strike out and solve this problem I just spoke to 70 to 75 people for. What was there, I mean, I guess you were validating your idea anyways, but in terms of leaving that comfort, like, was that any friction for you? At some point, was it like, this is an obvious decision, I got to do this?
Yeah, it was always like something I wanted to do, right? It was from an early age, like, hey, I know I want to go run a company. But a lot of it was around timing. And I know a lot of people say, oh, go do that when you're younger. For me, it took a little bit of time to get that confidence, honestly, and to get that experience to be able to do that. And then also be in a period of my life where I can kind of be a little risk on, I think. Right. And so that took confidence. Again, that's just years of experience. I don't think I could have done this in my 20s, believe it or not. So I'm happy that I waited. In terms of like making the leap though, I mean, the way I've thought about my career, and again, Wall Street, Etsy, Affirm is like those really big three pieces, is really just finding new experiences at every single piece of it. Right. It's just finding new things so that you don't get bored, and something new that rewards you. And ultimately for me, that's been learning. And so after scaling Etsy and Affirm, for me, it was kind of like, hey, I think this next big thing for me to check the box on is like, can I do this myself? Like, can I build a generational company, And so that became really the thing I wanted to really focus on. And then the good news is I had a lot of conviction. You can't do this without an almost irrational amount of conviction, which I had on the topic. And then, like I said, the last thing, maybe there's two things that go into this too, is one is TAM of what we're doing. I think it's safer for me to operate in a huge market, right? There's a lot more forgiveness in a massive, massive market, which we have, and happy to talk about that analysis. But also just the timing of the market was really interesting. And so, you talk about the luxuries of a corporate job, but we're in a really like unique period right now where, I don't know, some of these larger companies, is it as stable to be there as it is maybe as a 10-person startup? And so I don't know, I look at that risk trade-off, and I'm a little bit more excited about being at the smaller early stage company than a large one right now.
I mean, that's a very fair point as well. I believe, everyone's at will regardless of the size of the company. So, where that leaves you, I think that's a whole, interesting discussion. Obviously you mentioned, and maybe to go back to the TAM, because some people, it's interesting. I speak to so many founders, and I hear different approaches to this problem. When you were evaluating, your TAM and you were like, hey, I think this is a big problem that we could potentially attack and solve. And obviously the impetus to leave a job. How much of a factor was that? If the TAM was smaller and you're like, this business has a $10 million upside, like it's a small market, like even if we dominate it, it's worth 10, 20, 50 million. Is that a case of, you know what, I've got a lot of work history, I've got a lot of things here to give up? Obviously that's a lot of money, but as a founder, you don't keep all that unless you bootstrap. So we know that you're not going to end up with that share of the pie anyways. But I'm just kind of curious how that played in your mind, because that's interesting.
Yeah. Honestly, I haven't thought too much about that, but I mean, I think with knowing that there's a large TAM there, and again, like for us, it was like, okay, there's $400 billion of software changing hands every year in the US. There's another $400 billion of consulting and services changing hand. That's $800 billion TAM. There's so much to do there, right? Like even with missteps, like we will find something that works. Like, and that's what we're pretty convinced of, right? And so far our roadmap has been going pretty well as planned. But that made me feel, I think, a little bit more comfort in taking the full jump. Whereas if it was a much smaller TAM, perhaps I would have started off more as like a side project, like building that out really slowly and testing that before, making the jump away from corporate.
That's actually fair. And I think, I think when I talk to founders, sometimes they are evaluating. It's funny. I did speak to one who actually went through looking at different problems to solve and identified the problem to solve by trying to find which one addressed the larger TAM. Because he was like, I'd rather take that approach. I also speak to founders who are like, I went super narrow niche and now we have X products that widen our TAM. I think it's fascinating how every founder ends up with the business where they're at based on decisions. And obviously in hindsight, when you look at it, maybe some of the dots do connect, some of them don't connect, but
I'm just lucky. But
sometimes I've gotten that too. And I just interviewed somebody recently who said, they were lucky. And I'm like, man, you get lucky a lot. Can you just tell me what you're going to do next? And I will buy those same lottery number tickets. And something you mentioned that was interesting when we first spoke, you mentioned partnering with people you knew. And obviously you come with work history. I know who you have as your founding team, who you have as your co-founders. These are very important things. I guess maybe if you could dive into a little bit of that, that'd be nice as well.
Yeah. I probably took a bit of a honestly different approach than probably most founders did with how I started the business. And obviously people I know and trust from years of working with them is a part of that story. So I actually started with customers and funding before I even started with team. And I know most founders you probably talk to start with team and then they find the problem and the customers and the funding. So on my side, I did all that research. I mentioned to you those 75 founders that I interviewed, those became customers, right? And that's the beauty, right? You're having all these conversations and then you have folks saying, well, hey, can you build that for me? And so that's how Stackpack started was, oh my God, we have people that want to build something. I got to build something for them, right? And so of that list, we found 5 design partners that were like willing to actually give us feedback to. It wasn't just like, hey, we're going to pay you, but also we're going to give you feedback and we're going to build it, allow you to build along as we grow. So that was first and foremost. And then funding came next because I didn't feel comfortable hiring bringing on a team, an early team without having that in place. So I put some of my own capital in and then, we spoke about Wharton. This is like full circle. 3 of my first 4 institutional checks in were from Wharton classmates, all of whom run VCs now. And so this is where it's like that Wharton MBA, those 2 years and that investment was well worth the time when I think about now what my cap table looks like, right? And so funding came next. And I not the term sheet, but the handshake. And I knew the money would be there if I brought the team on and started building. And so then I had those 2 things, those 2 pieces of confidence, customers and funding to go bring in a team. And so then the team absolutely all came from my network. So I took a 2-pronged approach. I actually worked with an executive recruiting team to try to see if I could find a co-founder. So I'm I'm definitely go to market and product. I'm not technical, so I needed a technical co-founder. And again, that recruiting path actually did not work out. And ultimately it was my network, and one of my, Stackpack's design advisors that actually introduced us in the end to our head of engineering, who also came with a team of people as well. So really magical and unique, but was able to get not just one technical person, but 3 technical people who joined on day one. So a bit of it, maybe a different path. I'm not sure. You talk to more people than I do, but and all of that does come back to your point on the partnerships and the relationships.
No, it's interesting. That path is also a good one. I've seen, there's so many ways. That's what I love about startups and talking to founders. There are so many different ways people start. And I'm starting to I like telling the stories because as you hear everyone, I'm hoping people will be like, there isn't a recipe. It is not a formula. It is not a template. You have to do some of this stuff, and it's the risk more or less that you have to appreciate. And one thing you said that it kind of just resonated was, you went out and you knew your strengths, sales, marketing, and you look for people complementary. And you're the CEO of this company. I think there has been a long-standing stigma over startups that, there's certain types of people that become startups because they can take risks earlier. I'm also seeing a growing trend of people with work experience who are moving into becoming founders, but also they are coming from other backgrounds to become the CEOs from sales or marketing. I spoke to somebody who was a head of HR and is a CEO of a very technical product, which I was like, this is as technical as it possibly gets. And I'm seeing this trend of people with these ideas who are, operators in other areas. And if we believe what the market's telling us and what we're seeing in terms of coding is becoming easier, it feels like we're lowering a little bit of the barrier for other people with different backgrounds to potentially be founders. Still early days in that, but maybe.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think if you look at the data, which I always found really interesting, that the narrative was always like, oh, the average Silicon Valley founder is 24 years old and a coder. If you actually look at like the large exits, that's not what the average founder looks like, right?
Nope.
They actually have many, many years of experience, and they typically do have a more well-rounded background that does lead itself to product or to sales, right? And obviously sometimes coding, but it's typically like a more well-rounded leader. So I think that is shifting, right? Like if we've seen good outcomes there, then the VC dollars are going to go to more of that profile. And then to your point, it is early days, but I do think, we're seeing a market shift where there's more of the average person can actually build their MVP now potentially, without that initial, very technical co-founder. We shall see. Now, do I think that I still fully believe that you need a highly, highly talented tier A group of developers around you, which we've done. And I would do that over and over again. So
absolutely. A, it's early days. And B, I agree that someone once told me you can judge someone's expertise by the depth of the questions they can ask. And I think we will see that come true as we see more AI tools that help us in our job. The experts will ask better questions and we'll get better results from anyways, we won't dive into that. Let's I'm like, Amir, don't do that. We're going to go off into the back to the show. And just last few questions. I know you got to get back to it. When you look back at your journey, and obviously you come into it with the work history, you talked about picking the partners, the Wharton connection, right? Something that paid off without even knowing it at the time. Obviously, I'm sure you've also seen some things that now, if you look back on these couple of years, and you're like, hey, you know what? Maybe I would have thought about something a little differently, or maybe I would have done something differently in these last couple of years. Are there any learnings or advice you go, if I did this again, to some potential founders out there and be like, hey, don't do what I did. Maybe try this instead.
Yeah. I think back to what you just mentioned about, I I didn't have the confidence level to go do this because of some of the narratives. I really wish I didn't listen to those. And so I wish I probably jumped into this a little earlier than I did, frankly. But again, it all worked out kind of as it needed to. When I look at there's been so many, we've been doing this for almost 2 years now. We're about to hit our 2-year anniversary. There's been a lot of learnings, as you can imagine. I think one of the things that's very top of mind for me literally right now is basically, if you're not awesome at something, like outsource it or like find the person that is. And we do an okay job of that. But like an example that we're facing right now is we've tried for the last 2 years to have a killer website, like very basic, right? This doesn't sound hard, a marketing website, but like we're product people, right? We're not marketers, right? And so finally, here I am 2 years later, and we've now built 4 websites. None of them are converting the way we want. None of them are telling our story the way that we want. And we finally have found an outsourced partner that is it's taking a month to build the whole thing and making all of our problems go away. So that's something that I don't know. I wish I wasn't so, I wish I just threw the money at it a lot earlier, just to get to a better outcome faster. So that's one thing. I think we felt that in a lot of different places. So yeah, that's one thing. I think the biggest learning about like my role as a founder, which is different than like my time leading at a firm, for example, in parts of it still hold. But you kind of hear like, oh, the founder's job, the number one job of a founder is to hire the right people, get them in the right seats. I think that's true. But also I think my other biggest job is like setting pace. Like it's just keeping up the momentum, like having the team focused on the right things and being crystal clear on what the goals are. And so like, again, I'm like, oh my God, my job is a pace setter. Like, and so like, that's been an interesting shift in my mind. And again, you have the right pace, you have the right people, you have the right direction. It all does kind of take care of itself if you have like that recipe. So that's been an interesting learning and something that I probably didn't appreciate of all the founders that I worked with and CEOs that I worked with in my last 2 companies.
That's cool. I mean, those are, that's actually some fantastic insights. And obviously, we'll look back in probably 2 more years and there'll be a whole host of different problems that you will have learned from. And Sara, I appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, your journey with us. If someone does have a question, if they're potentially thinking about going down this path and they're like, hey, I think Sara might help me, is there a good way of connecting with you, asking you a question?
Yeah. Hit me up on LinkedIn. You can find me there, DM me. And I'm pretty good about getting back to everyone.
Okay. Fantastic. Sara, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Amir.
Absolutely. All right. That's it for this episode. Be back again. Different guest, different topic. Until then, 2 things. One, I think Sara did a fantastic job walking us through her journey, how she became a founder. She started off investment banking, had that Wharton MBA, which actually ended up paying off in a way she hadn't envisioned, what she's learned from the last couple of years, and obviously who she started her business with, and just how she evaluated the opportunity and did a lot of the market research up front before she dove on in. And I think it's a great episode. Please share this with somebody else who might benefit from it. Also, like, subscribe, comment, let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.